Well, greetings and thank you so much for tuning in to this chapter on our ebook series, providing activities that are social justice oriented to incorporate into your classroom. This activity's title is the Ubuntu String Activity, Foundational Concepts for Exploring Diversity and Oneness. My name is Dr. Antonio Mexico, and thank you again for checking out this lesson. Now, for this activity, all you're going to need is a ball of yarn, preferably bright colored yarn, and an open space outside. And so I engage students in this activity on the first day of class for students taking introductory courses to psychology, sociology, and social work. The students do not need to know one another prior to engaging in this activity. In fact, a lack of familiarity with one another is a positive aspect of this activity. So the instructor can facilitate this activity with groups as small as 4, and I've facilitated this activity with groups as large as 40 students. Now, prior to conducting the activity, the instructor should provide a brief overview and terminology, including social justice, diversity, and inclusion. Other concepts such as critical theory and the sociological imagination are also helpful for students to have a very basic understanding of these terms in order to engage in the activity. The overview does not need to exceed 15 minutes, and during this time, I also ask students to consider what social justice topics they find themselves most concerned with in relation to their own lives. Topics such as systemic racism, gender discrimination, homophobia, transphobia, or gun violence might be some examples of topics that your students connect with. I explain to students that rather than focus on our differences, this activity will be preparing or they'll be participating in is designed to focus on the common attributes that are shared across populations and communities. So to facilitate this activity, like I said, all you'll need is this ball of yarn. This one here, you can get relatively cheap at a hobby store. I think it's about 364 yards in this case. Now you can conduct this activity inside. I've done that in the past. However, it's optimal for students to step outside the classroom environment while providing a space for students to spread out during the activity. Now, once outside with the yarn, the instructor asks the students to form a tight circle facing inward towards one another. The instructor joins the students on the perimeter of the circle along the edge, just like with the students. And the instructor explains the concept of Ubuntu, which means I am because we are, and expands the concept to consider that other tribal communities, such as the Maya, had similar philosophies of oneness. The instructor explains that in tribal societies, a small group of human beings, though different, rely on one another for their own survival and development. Ubuntu means that no human being can ever reach their full potential without relying on other human beings. The instructor then eases the anxiety of students, sharing that they will not be asked to share anything deeply personal during the activity. I say we're not going to go anywhere deep and dark, okay? Rather, they're simply going to be asked to share their favorite comfort food. Now, the instructor should ask students to think about the food that no matter how badly their day went, or no matter how stressed or frustrated they might have been, they can come home to that specific meal that's already prepared on the table. And due to that connection with that dish, all of their anxiety, all of their frustration just melts away. That dish just makes everything better. And I let them know that's the idea of a comfort food. So the instructor would start by sharing their own comfort food. Okay, so for me, I would start by saying that's my grandmother's chile rellenos and homemade flour tortillas. I let them know those flour tortillas need to be thick and they need to have the flour powder still on there, and that to me is my idea of comfort food. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the string, unravel a little bit of it, okay? And I'm going to hold on to a piece of the string. This is important. You want to hold on to a piece of the string. And then I'm going to toss this yarn, okay, across the circle to another random student, okay? And now what I'm going to do is the instructor should then direct the group that as each student shares, they too are going to share their comfort food. They're going to hold on to a piece of the string just like I am here, and they're going to take the ball of yarn and toss it to another random student across the circle. Now, this process should continue until until everyone in the circle has shared their name and their comfort food, and everyone is holding on to a piece of the string. Now, once everyone has shared, the class will notice that there's a large web of string that has been formed inside the circle, and that everyone is connected to the same string. While everyone is holding the string, the instructor then shares that the web that has been created is a visual example of human connections and the interrelated structure of humanity. This is what Ubuntu looks like. The instructor should share that prior to starting the activity, many students, right, may not have known each other, and it would have been easy for students to use their own experiences and judgment to profile students into categories based on individual attributes like race, gender, income, or ability. And while doing so is part of a natural process of human behavior, it also creates a process of othering, which can lead people to discriminate against one another by unnecessarily feeling others simply because they are different, or avoiding to include others because they may view others in society as less than. So the instructor should then go on to explain that while everyone here may have a different comfort food based on their experiences, everyone can understand what it is like to have a bad day and to desire the emotional comfort of a familiar and loved dish. In addition, then describing their comfort foods, many students may have connected their dish to a person they loved or had a strong relationship with, much like I saw that it was my grandmother's chile rellenos, right? So there was a relationship there. Now, while we are all did not know the same people, we all know what it is like to love and be loved by someone and to remember the love that was shared within that relationship, just like when we discussed about our comfort food. So while we share different ideas of what is considered delicious, we all share a common understanding of the type of love that brings comfort to even the most stressful moments in our lives. The instructor then should highlight that no one asked to share something deeply traumatic or personal about themselves, and that oftentimes we think that establishing relationships with others who may be different is a difficult task, but just like we saw in this activity, there are certain attributes that we can all relate to that supersede race, gender, sexuality, ethnicity, and ability. So the professor should then go on to tell students on the count of 3 that they will ask everyone to remain holding on to their string, okay? But I'm going to ask them to take 3 steps back. Now, the professor then counts to 3 and asks the group to take 3 steps back. And what you'll notice is, as a professor, you'll notice that there's tightening in the string. Tension, okay, forms in the string. Now, you're going to ask the students what they observed. What did you observe happen to the string when everyone took 3 steps back? And now most students are going to say that tension formed in the string, or they may say something like the string, the web tightened up. The instructor should then state that this is an example of what happens in society when we engage in the practice of othering. When we fear other groups in society that we don't know, our first instinct is to step away, and this only creates tension in society. When we harm others for being different, call them names, institutionalize bias, or marginalize vulnerable groups, we create tension between ourselves and our neighbors. Now, the instructor should ask the students on the count of 3, holding on to the string again, to take 4 steps forward. The instructor will then count to 3, and together, the class takes 4 steps forward. The instructor should then ask the students to observe what happens to the string again when we all step forward, and you'll see this happen, right? So many students will respond and say the tension was released. The instructor then reiterates the concept of Ubuntu and asks students to consider 2 quotes related to inclusion. One comes from Mother Teresa: "If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to one another." The second quote comes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. "We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Therefore, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." Like the quote shared by Mother Teresa and Dr. King, social justice depends heavily on creating interactions, societal systems, and policies that lead to the inclusion of others and that bring people closer together. Critical theory calls for us not only to examine the oppressive systems, but to correct them for the sake of creating a more socially just and morally sound society. Likewise, the ecological perspective recognizes that societal systems and the relationships within them are complex, and for the individuals to have inclusive experiences, our environment must also value and facilitate social changes necessary to create an inclusive environment. The instructor then asks the class to debrief from the activity and share any thoughts or ideas or reflections they may have with the group. The instructor then asks the class to simply just go ahead and set the string down. I just tell them, go ahead and put the string down where it rests, and they'll just put it down in front of them on the ground. And at that time, what I do is I release the class for a brief break while gathering up the string, and then I continue with my lesson through the end of class. So I hope you found this activity helpful. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Appreciate you all. Take care.